Come for the cocktails, stay for the camera lesson, all of that. Today we're making the old fashioned, and not just any old fashioned, the best old fashioned you've ever had. And you can make it easily from home. Kind of goes without saying that the old fashioned is just a cocktail where a lot of people have very strong opinions around what makes an old fashioned an old fashioned. For me, share a lot of cocktail tutorials and recipes online. So every time I post about it on social media, no matter how perfectly I made it, there's always someone or a whole group of people commenting, that's not an old fashioned. And these people aren't simply saying, oh, you made it with rye whiskey, I prefer it with bourbon, or you use Demerara syrup, I prefer sugar. They're saying that is not an old fashioned. The way you make it is wrong. And I guess that's just kind of the world we live in right now. But honestly, the only people who are wrong are the people saying you're making it wrong. Because the indisputable fact of the matter is that the old fashioned is not an actual cocktail recipe. It's actually a template. It goes back to, the old school cocktail days. That's why we call it the old fashioned. Before cocktails were really even a thing. You would go to a bar, or more likely a saloon, you would just drink a spirit neat. But if you didn't want to just drink a neat spirit, you would ask the bartender to modify it, lengthen it. It would be a spirit, a little bit of water, some bitters, maybe some sugar. There generally wasn't a whole lot of fresh fruit around, so there wasn't orange or cherries or anything like that. You just have this very simple kind of lengthened cocktail. Eventually, cocktails became a little more fun and interesting, and there were different names and different recipes. And as these cocktail menus started coming around, people would go, I just want one of those old-fashioned cocktails, like before cocktails were cool. Again, an old-fashioned was and is a template. You can make it with any spirit, even though we now commonly think of an old-fashioned being made with some sort of whiskey or brandy. You could use gin, rum, tequila, anything you want really. But it was spirits, a little bit of water, sugar, bitters, that's it. People will continue to argue over the details, like whether or not to muddle the fruit into the drink or to fill it up with 7-Up like they do in Wisconsin for some reason, while others try and make the old-fashioned, at least in the spirit of the original classic, if we can even say that. Because again, since it's a template, what even was the original? So today I'm making you what is, in my opinion, the best classic old-fashioned. But hey, it's a template. It's meant to be customized. What I like might not be what you like. So take this recipe, try it out, see what you think, and adjust it for your own tastes and preferences. So let's get started. At least one thing everyone can, for the most part, agree on is that an old fashioned is made with bitters, traditionally Angostura aromatic bitters. The exact amount is up to you. Bitters are essentially your seasoning, your salt and pepper, if you will. I like it a little heavier on the bitters. You might like a little less. Again, up to you. Some people like to muddle a sugar cube in an old fashioned. This, again, is a very old school way of making the drink and likely how they would have made it back in the day. But the problem is sugar doesn't dissolve very well in alcohol. So if you do follow this method of just crunching up the sugar, you're gonna end up with all of these sugar granules in the bottom of the drink, resulting in kind of chewing on the cocktail. So I just kind of like cutting out that step and making a rich simple syrup using Demerara sugar, which is essentially raw sugar. As you can see, it's pretty dark. And I will just add like a teaspoon, or you could say a bar spoon, into the cocktail. Not every bar spoon is the same size though. I just know this one is roughly a teaspoon. Again, this is personal preference here. If you like that crunchy sugar thing in your cocktail, by all means go for it. I just personally think that making a syrup ahead of time just creates a more balanced cocktail and a much more enjoyable sipping experience. And now for our spirit. Like I said, you can use any spirit you want. Traditionally though, we expect an old fashioned to be made with an aged spirit like a bourbon, a rye whiskey, a brandy, something in that vein. I really like old fashions made with rum or an aged tequila. So again, it's up to you. My personal preference is a nice spicy rye whiskey, but again, bourbon is something a lot of people just kind of expect to be in a classic old fashioned, so we're using a bourbon. We're now gonna add ice to our mixing glass and give it a good stir. Since an old fashioned is made from primarily spirit, you don't want to shake it. You just want to gently stir it with ice. This will just help combine the sugar, the bitters, the spirit, while maintaining that velvety spirit forward texture. Next, we'll take our rocks glass. Typically, when serving a classic old fashioned, it's served over a big cube. This one's kind of rectangular. If you're using a large piece of ice like this, you don't want to take it right from the freezer and pour the cocktail on it because the ice is going to crack and fissure. So I'm going to temper this by just setting it out for at least 30 seconds to a minute, just to allow it to kind of acclimate to room temperature before straining my cocktail. Now, if you're making this drink for a guest, you probably want to get some ice tongs so you aren't handling their ice with your fingers. Now we'll strain our old fashioned. The final step is adding orange oil and an orange peel garnish. So I'm gonna take a nice big orange. You can use a Y peeler, a paring knife. I like using this cheese knife for my citrus twists, just a lot safer and just gets you a nice, big, beautiful citrus peel. For expressing the oils, you want to hold the peel like so with the skin facing outwards and try to just handle the edges. If you handle this too much with your fingers, the oil's gonna come off on your fingertips instead of on your drink. Gently squeeze over the top of the cocktail. You might see just a very faint mist. It's generally not super obvious. You could even gently wipe the rim of the glass so you get as much of those oils on there. Then to garnish, we could just give this a little twist and place it in the drink. I like to put it on the cutting board here and trim up the edges a little bit. Just makes the final result look a little classier, a little neater. When it comes to cocktails, the small details, like using clear ice or trimming up your citrus peels, are the big details. Personally, I think it just shows a love and care for the craft, that it's not simply about putting booze in a cup, but it's about creating a culinary experience. All right, fam, you know what comes next. This is Cocktail Camera. We don't just make cocktails here, we also have to learn to photograph them. The problem with making these videos is I have to break one of my core principles, which is light before liquid, meaning you want to set up your shot, your lighting, your camera angles before liquid hits the glass. Why? Because cocktails die. They don't live forever, especially ones with ice in them. I think of it like a timer starting as soon as you pour the cocktail into the glass, because even within like a minute, you start getting condensation on the edge of the glass or fingerprints, or the ice just starts to melt and it just doesn't look as good. So you want to capture your cocktail when it's looking its best and its freshest. All that to say, we're gonna have to make this again once we set up our shot, but honestly, I don't mind. For capturing our old-fashioned cocktail photo, we're gonna use off-camera flash. To do that, I have a small speed light. This isn't even all that new or fancy. It's a Godox V860 Mark II. I think they're up to the Mark III or even IV at this point. Pretty sure I got this for $150, maybe less at this point. So again, not fancy, not expensive. I'm gonna put this on a little stand, and then I have a little wireless trigger that I'll put on my camera itself so that I can use this off camera. I guess we'd call this like a bare bulb flash because we don't have a modifier on it. I would typically have some sort of umbrella or softbox like my video light here to diffuse and shape the light, but I'm going for like a really dramatic hard shadow look with this one, so we'll see how it turns out. Got the Sony a7 IV here with a 24 to 70 millimeter zoom lens. There's a little wireless trigger I was telling you about. So again, light before liquid. So we're gonna test out our setup and our lighting with an empty glass before we remake the cocktail and shoot it for real. So let me show you what we're looking at here. So we've got our camera with our wireless trigger here, which will wirelessly communicate with our flash, which is over there in the corner. And then we have our Ericsson Surface here, which is just a nice wood photography surface that's a little cleaner and nicer looking than my actual bar top. And then we have our empty glass so we can take a few test shots and see how it looks. Make sure our trigger and our flash are talking. And this video light you see up in the corner will not actually factor into the exposure. I am shooting at 1/250 for shutter speed, ISO 100, and f/5.6 for aperture. So there's no ambient light in this photo. The only light is coming from my flash. As you can see from these first few test photos, the lighting is very harsh, very unforgiving, and you can see just how dirty the glass is. So we got to take care of that. But you can also see that, half or maybe a third of the image is pretty overexposed. And again, just very harsh, not actually artsy looking. So I do want to modify this flash a bit. I'm not going to put a softbox or any sort of diffusion in front of it, but I am going to use these flags. These are black V-flats, which can be used for flagging off the light. So I'm just going to restrict the lighting a bit so it's not quite, it's still going to be just as bright. I'm not going to change the power level of the flash, but I'm just going to restrict how much light can actually come through. Placing these right here. So we just kind of have a thin line of the flash that can come through. Should be able to see better from this angle right here where our flash is going to come through. Might narrow this even more. Take a few more test shots. All right, fam, here's what I'm looking at. That's a little more what I'm going for. Just that nice little sliver of light peeking through. And I think once we have ice and the cocktail in there, that's going to catch the light really nicely and look really cool and dramatic. If you want to get your glassware truly spotless, get some of these Riedel polishing cloths, essential for any drink photographer. Remember, temper that ice before you pour the drink so it doesn't crack. Then we're just making another old fashioned here real quick. So we have our cocktail made, looking great. Have our lighting for the most part dialed in, we think. None of this light from the window or video light is gonna come through, but let's see how this looks now with the complete cocktail. Might have to make some adjustments as we go. Ooh, already I'm liking it. Oh, this is good. So I'm adjusting the positioning slightly, just because I want the shadow of the cocktail to match up a bit with the light pattern from the flash. We'll see if we can do that. Oh, so moody, I love it. Sometimes you gotta fiddle with the garnish just a little bit, especially with these citrus twists. They do like to kind of untwist on you after a while, so sometimes you just gotta get in there with your hands. That clear ice is looking real nice. I love it. This is turning out great. Honestly, I think these are some really cool shots. They're pretty much exactly what I was envisioning when I set up this shot, so I'm pretty happy with this. Now, of course, you don't need off-camera flash necessarily to capture an image like this. You can get kind of lucky with the lighting that day or the time of day. Right now is actually afternoon, so I'm actually gonna pop over to the window, take advantage of that low direct sunlight and, capture some more images that are in a similar vein. But the reality is you can't control the sun, you can't control the weather or where the sun's gonna hit or if there's clouds that day, and that's where off-camera flash helps a ton. You can just have a lot more flexibility and versatility in your setup and your lighting to create what you're actually envisioning. That's it for this one. Drop me a comment below, let me know what you'd like to see in future tutorials, and I'll catch you in the next one.